Pecos, Texas. The early 1960s. Out on the flat, endless cotton country of West Texas, a young man in a plain suit is quietly becoming one of the richest and most powerful figures in the state. A devout Church of Christ lay preacher who doesn't drink, doesn't smoke, tithes generously, and is building an agricultural empire on a product you cannot see: anhydrous ammonia, liquid fertilizer stored in big steel tanks on farms across the county, or rather, stored in tanks that mostly do not exist. Because the fortune of Billie Sol Estes is built on tens of thousands of fertilizer tanks that were never manufactured, mortgaged to finance companies for tens of millions of dollars, and verified by inspectors, the farmers had been coached to fool. And wrapped around this West Texas fertilizer swindle is something far darker than paper. A web of connections reaching to the Vice President of the United States. A federal investigator found dead with 5 rifle wounds ruled a suicide. And questions that have never, to this day, been fully answered. Tonight, the con leaves the ledger and touches something colder. This is the story of the phantom tanks and the bodies around them. Billie Sol Estes is born in 1925 on a hardscrabble Texas farm, and he is, from boyhood, a genuine prodigy of enterprise. The kind of natural salesman who turns a gift lamb into a flock and a flock into a bankroll before he's 20. He marries his faith to his ambition, a sincere, lifelong Church of Christ man whose reputation for piety becomes, like Ponzi's smile and Bottomley's flag, part of the machinery. Who suspects the preacher who funds the church? By the 1950s, Estes has built a sprawling, real agricultural business across Pecos: grain storage, cotton, fertilizer, land. And he collides with the same government subsidy world that made Tino de Angelis. The federal cotton allotment system, which limits how much cotton a farmer can grow but lets allotments transfer with land. Estes games it aggressively, arranging land deals that let him accumulate cotton allotments, and draws his first federal scrutiny. But the real engine, the one that makes and destroys him, is fertilizer finance. Here is the scheme. Estes goes to farmers across West Texas with a proposition that seems, to a cash-poor farmer, like free money. On paper, the farmer buys anhydrous ammonia tanks and equipment from Estes on credit, signing a mortgage, a chattel mortgage, on the tanks. Estes then buys that mortgage back from the farmer, and the farmer leases the same tanks back to Estes for exactly the mortgage payment. The farmer nets a small fee for signing, owes nothing, and, he's assured, takes no risk. The farmers sign gladly. Many never see a tank. The tanks, in overwhelming number, are never built. Estes takes those mortgages, paper claims on tens of thousands of non-existent fertilizer tanks, and sells them to finance companies across the country for cash. It is warehouse receipt fraud again, De Angelis's ocean in a different disguise. Instead of seawater behind the paper, there is simply empty prairie. He raises, by the estimates, over $20 million, possibly far more, against equipment that was never manufactured. And when the finance companies send inspectors to verify the collateral, the West Texas swindle reveals its folksy genius. Farmers are coached, tanks are moved and renumbered and shown twice. Inspectors are met with hospitality, driven long distances between sites, and shown the same handful of real tanks wearing different serial numbers. The same trick as the salad oil pipes, run across hundreds of miles of dirt road with a neighborly handshake. For a few years, Estes is a titan. Private planes, a mansion, national 10 outstanding young men honors, and deep, useful ties to the Democratic Party of Texas, including men in the orbit of the Vice President Lyndon Johnson. Long before the tanks collapse, one federal man smells it. Henry Marshall, an official in the U.S. Department of Agriculture, is investigating Estes's suspicious cotton allotment land deals in 1961. He is reportedly resistant to pressure, moving toward exposing the scheme. In June 1961, Henry Marshall is found dead on his own Texas ranch. Beside him, a bolt-action rifle. The local ruling, suicide. He had been shot 5 times. Sit with that. A man shoots himself with a rifle that must be manually recocked between each shot, 5 times in the torso. The local authorities call it suicide, and for years it stands. Only later, after everything else unravels, is it re-examined, reclassified as murder, and left officially unsolved. It is the first of several deaths that cluster around the Estes affair, each one convenient, each one ruled self-inflicted or accidental, none ever pinned to anyone. This is where our series brushes against something it usually doesn't. Not just the theft of money, but the possibility that a paper empire, threatened, reached for something worse than a forged signature. The fertilizer fraud finally implodes in 1962, when a local Pecos newspaper and then the FBI pull the thread. The finance companies holding mortgages on the same serial-numbered tanks begin comparing notes and discover they've all been sold claims on the same phantom equipment. The collateral behind tens of millions of dollars is, once again, mostly air. Estes is arrested. The empire evaporates. He is convicted in state and federal court and, after appeals, serves years in federal prison for fraud and conspiracy. But the story refuses to die quietly because of those deaths and those connections. For decades, Billie Sol Estes dangles sensational claims, most explosively in the 1980s, testifying to a grand jury and telling anyone who would listen that Lyndon Johnson had ordered Henry Marshall killed to protect them both, naming an LBJ aide as the go-between. He offers to lead investigators to bodies. He names names. And here is the honest problem. The reason this episode ends in fog, where the others end in a verdict. Billie Sol Estes was a professional liar, a convicted con man who profited again and again from telling powerful stories that could not be checked. His accusations were never proven. Some were almost certainly self-serving fabrications, but Henry Marshall really was shot 5 times and called a suicide. The reclassification to murder really happened, and no one was ever charged. That is the uniquely uncomfortable residue of the Estes case. A known fraudster's claims that we cannot believe. Attached to a dead body we cannot explain. He dies in 2013 in Texas, unrepentant and still talking. The phantom tanks are long scrapped, the money long gone. What remains is the shape the case cut into American memory. Proof that a con doesn't always stay clean paper. Push a paper empire hard enough, and sometimes the paper is the least frightening thing in the room. The playbook. What Billie Sol Estes adds to the manual. And this is the one that should chill you. Rule 1, mortgage the thing no one will drive out to count. Distance and dust are as good as a locked vault. Rule 2, piety and politics are collateral too. A preacher with friends in high places is inspected last, if ever. Rule 3, the dark one. When a paper empire's exposure threatens the men holding it up, the fraud is sometimes not the worst crime in the file. The paper empire ledger adds Estes's phantom fertilizer, north of $20 million 1960s dollars, and stands at roughly 540 million counted. But this is the one episode where the ledger feels beside the point, because money was never paper. It's belief wearing paper's clothes, and sometimes defending belief costs more than money. Next time, the season finale of Paper Empire. Everything you've watched, Ponzi's coupons, Kruger's matches, the salad oil, the phantom tanks, laid side by side, one final time, to answer the only question that matters. Why does it always work? And how do you see it coming before you're the one standing in the line? The pattern, the finale. Subscribe.